Two true scary stories from Reddit, Creepypasta, the strange and unsettling encounters. There are some stories that defy logic, leaving an indelible mark on the minds of those who experience them. Tales where the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin, where past events refuse to remain buried, and where the strange and inexplicable become terrifyingly real. What happens when the past, no matter how much we try to forget it, comes rushing back to haunt us? When those we thought we lost forever seem to still linger among us, whispering from the shadows, and warning us of a future we never saw coming. What if the supernatural is not something distant, something you read about or watch in a movie, but something that lives and breathes in the very real world we inhabit? Something that creeps into your everyday life and shakes the foundation of everything you thought you knew about existence. These are not fictional tales, these are true stories. Stories shared by ordinary people on Reddit, strangers you will never meet but whose lives have been touched by the inexplicable in ways that will make your skin crawl and your heart race. They are real. They happened. The stories you are about to read are not the product of a fevered imagination or a twisted mind. They are the accounts of those who have lived through encounters with the unknown. They have felt the chill of a presence in the room when they were alone, heard whispers in the night when there should have been silence, and faced the eerie certainty that something beyond our understanding was watching them. These stories come from people like you and me, people whose lives have been altered forever by the supernatural. The stories that follow will make you question everything, and when you close this book, you may find yourself wondering, what if it happens to you next? As we journey into these unsettling events, I ask you to suspend your disbelief for a moment. It's easy to dismiss the strange, to brush it off as coincidence or madness. But what if the things we cannot explain are the things that are most real? Imagine hearing footsteps behind you when no one is there, feeling eyes on you even though you're alone, or waking up to the distinct feeling that the world around you is shifting, reality becoming something less solid, less certain. I can feel the weight of it as I tell these stories, as if something is watching me even now, hovering just beyond my peripheral vision. These are not the comforting tales of bedtime stories. No, these are the kind of stories that make you glance over your shoulder in the dark, the kind that will linger with you long after you've finished reading. And though they come from the anonymous corners of the internet, the emotions, the fear, the experiences, they are all too real. Let us step into the unknown together. The world of shadows, whispers, and echoes from the past, where things thought to be long gone come back with a vengeance. Hold tight, for once you've read these stories, you may never look at the world the same way again. Are you ready to face the unimaginable? The stories that follow will take you to places where the supernatural is not a distant myth, but an undeniable presence that shapes the lives of those who encounter it. With each word, with each twist, you will feel the veil between reality and the unknown grow thinner. And as we journey deeper into the eerie, remember this: these stories are true. Story 1: The Ghost Boy, a Mysterious Encounter. Michael was determined to make this move the turning point for his family. After years of living paycheck to paycheck, a promotion had finally made the dream of owning a spacious, charming home in the suburbs a reality. The house, a picturesque Victorian-style structure with ivy crawling up the brick walls, seemed perfect at first glance. The neighbors were welcoming, the neighborhood serene, and the property large enough for the kids to play freely. But there was something about the house that Michael couldn't shake off. Maybe it was the way the grand oak staircase creaked underfoot, or the way the air felt unusually cold in the west hallway, even on warm afternoons. His wife, Laura, dismissed his unease as stress from the move, and their kids, Sophie and Lucas, were too excited about their new rooms to notice anything unusual. It didn't take long, though, for the house to start revealing its secrets. Doors creaked open on their own, lights flickered inexplicably, and there was always a faint sound of movement coming from the attic. Michael tried to rationalize it. The house was old, and old houses came with quirks. But when Lucas began talking about his friend, things took a turn that no amount of rationalizing could explain. At first, it seemed innocent enough. 5-year-old Lucas, with his boundless imagination, was often found sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, mumbling to himself as he played with his toy cars. "Who are you talking to, buddy?" Michael asked one evening. "Tony," Lucas replied matter-of-factly, not looking up. Michael chuckled. "And who's Tony?" "He's my new friend," Lucas said, a smile lighting up his face. "He likes to play cars with me, but he doesn't like loud noises." Laura thought it was adorable. "He's made an imaginary friend," she said, with a laugh, brushing off Michael's raised eyebrows. "It's normal for kids his age." But as the days went on, Lucas's descriptions of Tony became unnervingly detailed. "He has brown hair and a red shirt," Lucas explained over dinner one night. "But his shirt is kind of dirty and his pants have holes." Laura smiled indulgently, but Michael's fork paused mid-air. "What else can you tell us about Tony?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. Lucas thought for a moment. "He doesn't live here. He said he used to live in another house, but he got lost after the crash." "What crash?" Michael asked, his stomach tightening. "A car crash, near a big road with lots of sand. He said it was in Vegas." The room fell silent. Lucas returned to his food as if nothing were amiss while Michael and Laura exchanged uneasy glances. The following week, Michael started noticing things he couldn't ignore. A shadow darting across the hallway when he was home alone. The faint sound of a child giggling when Lucas wasn't even in the house. Laura began waking up in the middle of the night, convinced she'd heard footsteps outside their bedroom door. But it was Lucas's increasing attachment to Tony that truly unnerved them. One night, Michael walked into Lucas's room to find him whispering in the dark. "Who are you talking to?" Michael asked, flipping on the light. Lucas pointed to the empty corner of the room. "Tony. He doesn't like the light. He says it makes him feel funny." Michael's blood ran cold. "Lucas," he said carefully, "you know Tony isn't real, right?" Lucas frowned. "He's real, Dad. He told me his mommy is sad because she can't find him." Michael didn't know what to say. He sat with Lucas until the boy fell asleep, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone in the room. As the days passed, more strange occurrences began to pile up. Sophie claimed she saw a boy's reflection in her bedroom mirror, just for a split second, before it disappeared. Laura felt someone tug at her hair while she was in the shower, but when she turned around, no one was there. The temperature in the house seemed to drop drastically every evening, regardless of how high the thermostat was set. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, almost indiscernible, just a soft, rhythmic hum that could have been the wind. But one night, as Michael was working late in the study, he heard it clearly. "Help me." He froze, the pen slipping from his hand. The voice was small and fragile, like that of a young boy. It came again, more insistent this time. "Help me." Michael bolted from the study and spent the rest of the night pacing the living room, his mind racing. Who or what was Tony? And what did he want? It was meant to be a carefree family trip. Laura suggested the drive to Las Vegas as a way to unwind and create new memories after the recent stress of moving. Michael hesitated but eventually relented, hoping the change of scenery would help him shake off the unease that had been growing since Lucas's friend had entered their lives. The road was long and winding, stretching through an expanse of arid desert. Sophie had her headphones on in the back seat, and Lucas was playing with his toy cars. Laura hummed along to the radio, her mood noticeably lighter. For the first time in weeks, Michael allowed himself to relax, even if only a little. But as they rounded a sharp curve on a secluded stretch of highway, Lucas suddenly shouted from the back seat, "Stop! Dad, stop!" Startled, Michael slammed on the brakes and the tires screeched against the asphalt. The car lurched to a halt, throwing everyone forward in their seats. Michael turned, his heart pounding. "Lucas, what's wrong?" Lucas's face was pale, his small hands clutching the seatbelt strap tightly. "Tony says there's danger ahead," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Lucas, what are you talking about?" Laura asked, her own fear creeping into her voice. Before he could answer, A truck came barreling around the corner from the opposite direction, swerving into their lane. The driver overcorrected and the massive vehicle skidded dangerously close to the edge of the ravine before managing to regain control and continue down the road. Michael sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel as his mind tried to process what had just happened. They had been seconds away from a head-on collision. "Michael," Laura whispered, breaking the silence. "If you hadn't stopped." Michael nodded, his throat too dry to speak. In the rearview mirror, Lucas sat quietly, his wide eyes fixed on the window. That night at the hotel, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying, in his mind like a haunting loop. "Tony says there's danger ahead." Those words echoed in his thoughts, louder with each repetition. Unable to ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to Lucas's imaginary friend than mere fantasy, Michael opened his laptop and began searching for information about crashes on the highway they had traveled. After hours of fruitless scrolling, he stumbled upon a small article from 10 years ago. Tragic accident claims life of young boy on desert highway. The article detailed how a car, veering out of control, on the same curve they had nearly crashed on, had plunged into the ravine. The only passenger, an 8-year-old boy named Tony Richards, had been pronounced dead at the scene. Michael's stomach twisted as he read the details. Tony. A boy named Tony. The coincidence was too specific, too eerie to ignore. He continued, digging, unearthing more articles about the accident. Each one painted a clearer picture of Tony Richards, his brown hair, his favorite red shirt, his love for toy cars. Michael sat back in his chair, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Everything Lucas had described about his friend matched the details of this boy. Tony wasn't imaginary. He wasn't a figment of Lucas's imagination. He was real. But how could Lucas have known? Michael's thoughts turned to the near accident on the road. Had Tony been trying to protect them? Was his presence tied to the crash that took his life? Or was it something darker, something beyond Michael's comprehension? The next morning, Michael showed the articles to Laura. She stared at the screen, her face pale. "You think this is the same Tony?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael nodded. "I don't know how, but Lucas knows things he shouldn't, details he couldn't possibly have made up." Laura covered her mouth with her hand. "Do you think he's in danger?" Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. The growing fear in his chest said it all. Michael sat in his home office late at night, surrounded by printouts and notes he'd collected over the past few weeks. Newspaper articles, police reports, and archived obituaries formed a scattered web of evidence pointing to a chilling truth he didn't want to believe. The face of Tony Richards stared back at him from an old grainy photograph, a small boy with kind eyes, brown hair, and a shy smile. The description matched Lucas's friend perfectly. He ran his hands through, his hair exhaling shakily. The accident Tony had died in wasn't just a tragic event from the past. It felt personal now, like the boy's fate was intertwined with his family's. Michael couldn't escape the thought that their near miss on the highway wasn't just luck but a warning. Lucas's behavior had also shifted in recent days. He wasn't talking about Tony as much, but his quiet demeanor carried a weight that Michael couldn't ignore. One evening while tucking Lucas into bed, Michael asked gently, "Do you still see Tony?" Lucas looked up at him, his small face solemn. "Not as much," he said. "He says he's tired." "Tired?" Michael repeated, confused. Lucas nodded. "He said he's done what he needed to do, but he's sad." "Why is he sad?" Michael whispered. Lucas hesitated, his fingers fiddling with the edge of his blanket. "Because no one ever listened to him before. He said it's been so long since anyone cared." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if Tony's spirit had been waiting for someone, anyone, to finally acknowledge his existence. Unable to leave the mystery unsolved, Michael decided to revisit the stretch of road where their near accident had occurred. He convinced Laura to come along, leaving Sophie and Lucas with a trusted neighbor. As they drove along the winding highway, Michael's thoughts raced. They stopped at a small memorial tucked off the side of the road. A rusted cross leaned against a weathered stone, surrounded by wilted flowers and faded ribbons. Carved into the stone were the words, "In loving memory of Tony Richards, forever 8 years old." Michael knelt beside the memorial, his hand brushing against the cold stone. He felt a pang of guilt and sadness, as though he'd failed to help a child who had reached out from beyond the grave. "He's been here this whole time," Michael murmured. Laura placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do you think he's at peace now?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out one of Lucas's favorite toy cars, a small red one, worn from countless hours of play. He placed it gently at the base of the memorial, feeling an overwhelming sense of connection and loss. As they stood there, the wind picked up, swirling around them in a strange, almost purposeful way. Michael could have sworn he heard a faint whisper, a voice that seemed to say, "Thank you." Back at home, Michael tried to move on, but the experience left him with more questions than answers. Who, or what, was Tony? Was he simply a lost, soul-seeking closure, or was there a larger force at play using the boy's memory to protect his family? The final piece of the puzzle came one night when Lucas approached Michael with a drawing. It showed their family car on a winding road surrounded by bright lights and a figure standing by the side. "That's Tony," Lucas said, pointing to the figure. "He says goodbye." Michael's throat tightened as he took the drawing. He didn't know whether to feel relief or sadness, but one thing was clear. Tony had given them a gift, an unexplainable but undeniable chance to avoid tragedy. As time passed, the family slowly returned to normal life, but the memory of Tony lingered. Michael kept the drawing in a drawer, a quiet reminder of the boy who had blurred the line between the living and the dead. And while Michael never spoke openly about what happened, he couldn't shake the question that haunted him late at night. Was it all a strange coincidence, or had he glimpsed a sliver of a world far beyond his understanding? For Michael, the answer didn't matter as much as the lesson Tony had left behind, that life is fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes, inexplicably, guided by forces we cannot see. Story 2. The Reincarnation of a Father. Daniel had always considered himself a rational man. As an architect, his life revolved around measurements, blueprints, and predictable outcomes. But when his son, Sunan, turned 6, cracks began to appear in the logical framework that Daniel relied upon. It started with little things, phrases Sunan used that Daniel hadn't heard since his father, Benjamin, passed away 5 years ago. Phrases like, "measure twice, cut once," or "the soul's joy is in the details," a motto Benjamin often muttered while working in his woodshop. At first, Daniel brushed it off as coincidence, but the instances multiplied. One evening, while flipping through an old photo album, Sunan pointed to a sepia-toned picture of a young Benjamin standing in front of his childhood home. "I remember this house," Sunan said casually, his tiny finger tracing the image. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, you remember?" Sunan shrugged, his focus still on the photo. "It's the one with the creaky stairs and the green door. That doesn't close right. Grandpa said I used to live there." Daniel stared at his son, speechless. The details were accurate. The stairs creaked and the front door had been painted green before his father repainted it years ago. But there was no way Sunan could have known that. The oddities didn't stop there. One day, while helping Daniel, in the garage, Sunan pointed to an old toolbox. "That's mine," he said confidently. Daniel chuckled nervously. "No, buddy, that was Grandpa's." Sunan tilted his head, his expression strangely serious. "No, it was mine before it was his. I gave it to him when he was younger." Daniel's hands trembled as he opened the toolbox. Inside was a collection of tools Benjamin had cherished, each one labeled in his distinctive handwriting. Sunan's eyes lit up with recognition as he picked up a rusted chisel. "I made the rocking chair with this," he said, smiling. The rocking chair. Benjamin had built it for Daniel's mother when they were newlyweds. It still sat in the corner of Daniel's living room. The tipping point came during a family dinner. Sunan, who usually avoided spicy food, asked for extra chili flakes on his pasta. When Laura, Daniel's wife, raised an eyebrow, Sunan grinned. "You don't remember? I used to eat spicy food all the time before I got old." Daniel and Laura exchanged uneasy glances. Benjamin had been known for his love of spice, something no one else in the family shared, except now it seemed for Sunan. The final, undeniable sign came on an ordinary Saturday morning. Sunan was playing in the backyard when Daniel noticed a faint scar on his son's arm. He froze. "Where did you get that scar?" he asked, his voice tight. Sunan glanced down casually. "I don't know. It's always been there." Daniel felt his chest tighten. The scar was identical to one Benjamin had, a jagged line across his forearm from a woodworking accident decades ago. He had sliced himself while carving a chair leg and carried the mark ever since. That night, Daniel sat alone in his study, the photo album open on his lap. He flipped through the pages, stopping at a picture of his father holding a young Daniel. He touched the image, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and curiosity. Was it possible? Could Sunan be Benjamin? The idea was absurd, yet the evidence felt undeniable. Memories, phrases, habits, even physical traits, all pointing to an unsettling truth that defied logic. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt the foundations of his reality shift. If what he suspected was true, then his understanding of life, death, and the bonds between them would never be the same. Daniel's nights became sleepless. He lay awake replaying Sunan's words, actions, and the inexplicable details he seemed to know about Benjamin's life. The uncanny similarities piled up like stones on his chest, each one making it harder to breathe. Was it just his grief twisting reality, or was there something more, something that defied logic? He began to notice even smaller, more intimate connections. Sunan had started humming a tune while playing with his toys. It was a song Benjamin used to hum while working in his shop, a melody he had never taught Daniel but that lived in his own childhood memories. At dinner one night, Laura served a family recipe Benjamin had loved, a spicy stew. Sunan tasted it, paused and said, "Needs more salt. And next time, don't forget the bay leaves." Laura froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. "How did you know I forgot the bay leaves?" Sunan shrugged. "You always do," he said with a mischievous grin. Daniel's stomach churned. It was a line Benjamin used to tease Laura with, a private joke between them that no one else could possibly know. Desperate for clarity, Daniel threw himself into research. Late at night, he pored over articles, books, and forums about reincarnation. He learned of cases where children claimed to remember past lives, providing details that could later be verified. Stories of children recalling distant towns, past families, and even their own deaths. The accounts were eerily similar to Sunan's behaviors. One story struck him deeply. A young girl in India who had identified her past life family and recounted events from her previous life with startling accuracy. Her case had been studied by scientists, and while skeptics dismissed it as coincidence, the evidence felt compelling. Daniel began reaching out to others who had experienced similar phenomena. He found a support group online, a mix of believers, skeptics, and those simply seeking answers. One user shared a story about their child, who had vivid memories of a life as a soldier in World War II. Another described their toddler speaking fluent phrases in a language they had no way of learning. It was both comforting and unsettling. Daniel wasn't alone, but he also wasn't sure he wanted to be part of this group. Determined to dig deeper, Daniel visited a psychic medium recommended by one of the group members. The psychic, a woman in her 60s with a calm demeanor, listened intently as Daniel recounted Sunan's behaviors. "There's a strong connection between your son and your father," she said, her voice steady. "The bond between souls doesn't always end with death. Sometimes they find their way back." Daniel's skepticism warred with the desperate hope that she might provide answers. But why? Why would he come back like this? The psychic smiled faintly. "Sometimes unfinished business, other times love. The reasons are as varied as the souls themselves. But one thing is clear. This isn't a curse or a coincidence. It's a gift, even if it feels like a burden right now. Despite her reassurance, Daniel left the session more unsettled than ever. Daniel's next step was to visit his childhood home, a place he hadn't returned to since Benjamin's death. He brought Sunan along, curious to see if his son would recognize anything. As they approached the house, Sunan's face lit up. "The tree swing!" he exclaimed, pointing to a gnarled oak in the front yard. Daniel's heart sank. The swing had been taken down years ago, after Benjamin's accident. "There's no swing, buddy," he said softly. "There was," Sunan insisted. "I used to push you on it when you were little. You'd laugh so much you'd almost fall off." The words hit Daniel like a blow. That swing had been Benjamin's favorite way of spending time with him as a child. He hadn't thought about it in years. Inside the house, Sunan wandered from room to room, naming objects and memories as if they were his own. "The clock's not here anymore," he said in the living room. "The one with the big crack in the glass?" Daniel nodded numbly. The clock had been Benjamin's favorite heirloom, shattered in a move years before Sunan was born. By the time they left, Daniel was overwhelmed. The coincidences were too many, the details too precise. His rational mind struggled to find explanations, but his heart began to accept what his son's words were telling him. That night, Daniel sat down with Laura. He told her everything: the psychic, the research, the visit to his childhood home. Laura listened quietly, her expression shifting between disbelief and concern. "Do you really think?" she began, then trailed off. "I don't know what to think," Daniel admitted. "But I can't ignore it anymore. He knows things, Laura. Things he couldn't possibly know. Either I'm losing my mind or your father came back," she finished softly. They sat in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. For the first time, Daniel felt both a flicker of hope and a shiver of fear. If this was true, if Benjamin had truly returned, what did it mean for their family? What did it mean for Sunan? Daniel's search for answers was far from over, but one thing was clear: his life, and his understanding of it, would never be the same again. Daniel sat on the edge of Sunan's bed, watching his son sleep peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling with rhythmic calm. For all the strange occurrences, this was the moment he cherished most: the stillness, the simplicity of fatherhood. But tonight, the air felt heavier, as if the room itself held secrets waiting to be unveiled. Sunan stirred and opened his eyes, looking directly at Daniel with a clarity far beyond his years. His gaze was steady, and for a moment, Daniel swore. He saw something familiar in those young eyes, something ancient. "Dad?" Sunan's voice was soft but carried an odd weight. "Yes, buddy?" Daniel responded, trying to keep his tone light despite the sudden chill crawling up his spine. Sunan sat up, his expression serious. "Do you remember the time we fixed the car together? The old blue one with the broken radiator?" Daniel froze. That car had been Benjamin's pride and joy, an ancient Ford that had barely run by the time Daniel was old enough to help with repairs. They had spent countless weekends under its hood, laughing and arguing over which tool was needed next. Sunan couldn't possibly know about it. "You mean Grandpa's car?" Daniel asked cautiously. Sunan shook his head. "No, our car. You were so mad when I spilled oil on the driveway, but we got it running again. That was a good day." Daniel's breath caught. The memory was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. He had been 16, and Benjamin had teased him mercilessly about the mess he'd made, calling it a rite of passage. "How do you know about that?" Daniel's voice cracked. Sunan tilted his head, his small hands fidgeting with the blanket. "Because I'm him, Dad. I'm Grandpa. I didn't mean to leave you so soon, but I had to. I'm sorry I couldn't be there longer." The words hit Daniel like a tidal wave. His heart raced and his vision blurred with tears. He wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the conviction in Sunan's voice was unshakable. Why are you saying this?" Daniel managed to ask. "I didn't want to leave you alone," Sunan whispered. and now I get to watch you grow up, just like I always wanted. It's strange being little again, but I remember everything. Daniel felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. Every rational part of him screamed that this couldn't be true, that there had to be an explanation, coincidence, subconscious, cues, anything. But deep down, he couldn't deny the warmth in his chest, the indescribable feeling of connection that only his father had ever given him. Tears streamed down his face as he reached out to hold Sunan's tiny hands. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "This is, Jan, it's too much." Sunan smiled, a gesture so reminiscent of Benjamin that it broke Daniel's heart all over again. "You don't have to say anything, Dad. Just don't forget, okay? Even when I grow up and don't remember as much, just know I'm here. I'm always here." The room fell silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Daniel's mind swirled with questions. Could he accept this as truth? Should he? What would it mean for Sunan's life if he did? He thought about the life his father had lived, the lessons he had passed down, and the love that had been the foundation of their bond. If Sunan truly carried a piece of Benjamin's soul, was it his responsibility to guide and nurture it? Or was it his duty to let Sunan grow into his own person, unburdened by the weight of reincarnation? As the night stretched on, Daniel stayed by Sunan's side, his thoughts shifting between disbelief and acceptance. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain. Love transcended everything: life, death, and even logic. In the days that followed, Daniel chose not to dwell on proving or disproving the truth. Instead, he focused on being the best father he could be, cherishing every moment with Sunan, knowing that whether or not his son was a reincarnation of Benjamin, the bond they shared was extraordinary. Life carried on, as it always does. But Daniel saw it through a new lens, one that blurred the lines between past and present, between the living and the departed. As Sunan grew older, the memories of his past life began to fade, replaced by the experiences of his current one. Daniel watched with a mix of relief and sadness, knowing that he might never fully understand the mystery that had unfolded. But he also knew that some questions didn't need answers to hold meaning. In the quiet moments when Sunan laughed or offered advice far beyond his years, Daniel felt Benjamin's presence. And in those moments he found peace, not in understanding, but in accepting the unbreakable connection between them. For Daniel, the line between the extraordinary and the everyday had blurred forever, leaving him with a profound sense of wonder and gratitude for the mysteries of life. As the threads of the two tales weave together, they leave behind an intricate tapestry of questions, emotions, and truths that linger in the mind like an unanswered whisper. These stories are more than just glimpses into the supernatural. They are mirrors reflecting the deepest corners of our humanity, our fears, and our longing to understand the unknown. In the story of Michael and Lucas, we confront the eerie notion of a connection that defies time, a child bridging the gap between tragedy and forewarning, and a father forced to grapple with the possibility that the past and the future might be intertwined. It reminds us of the fragility of life and the unexplainable ways the universe sometimes communicates with us, through dreams, intuition, or the voices of those we've lost. Then, there is Daniel and Sunan's tale, a story that pushes the boundaries of what we know about life and death. The idea that love could transcend even the finality of mortality, returning in a new form, challenges our perception of identity and existence. Daniel's journey to understand his son, and perhaps his father's soul, serves as a poignant reminder that the bonds we forge in life may not be so easily broken. Both stories blur the boundaries between the living and the dead, the past and the present, and reality and imagination. They ask us to consider the possibility that there is more to this world than what we can see and measure. Perhaps our loved ones never truly leave us, their essence lingering in the corners of our lives, guiding us, comforting us, or even reminding us of unfinished chapters. These narratives compel us to ask questions of ourselves. Do we believe in the supernatural, in spirits, in reincarnation? Or are these stories simply metaphors for the ways we process loss and hold on to the ones we love? How much of what we experience can truly be explained, and how much remains a mystery, beyond the reach of science or reason. Perhaps it is in these unanswered questions that the greatest truths lie. After all, isn't the human experience built on connections that transcend time and space? A smile from a stranger that feels familiar, a dream that lingers like a memory, a coincidence too, perfect to be chance. Aren't these the echoes of something greater, something eternal? The conclusion leaves us pondering the ultimate question: do we ever truly say goodbye to those we love? Maybe the answer lies not in the supernatural, but in the way love endures. It lives on in our memories, in the stories we tell, and in the quiet, inexplicable moments that make us stop and feel their presence again. As readers, we are left with the challenge of finding our own meaning within these tales. Whether you see them as supernatural mysteries or emotional journeys, their power lies in their ability to remind us of what it means to be human, to love, to lose, and to hope that even in the face of the unknown, we are never truly alone.